She Can, we tell women's stories. We show how women got to where they are today to serve as role models for others. And I'm really excited to talk to Mahaneela today. Mahaneela, welcome to She Can. You're a multidisciplinary artist from London with roots in Ghana, India, and Jamaica. You're fueled by your passion for photography and film, and you've established yourself as a director and photographer, boasting collaborations with industry giants such as Nike, Google, Apple, Meta, and you're bridging the gap between music and visuals through partnerships with acclaimed record labels. Your camera lens has captured the essence of musical luminaries such as FKA Twigs, The XS, Steve Lacy, and Grammy Award-winning artist Wizkid, among others. And in your personal creative pursuits, you gravitate towards intimate portraiture and cinematic narratives, exploring the diverse experiences of people of color across the globe. You directed a music video for Danae Moore, and you earned a Shiny Award nominations for that. Your short film Kindred showcased the Tate Modern, and your works have graced galleries across the world. You're also the founder of Cozy, a creative production company, and you're a really important mentor within your industry, Mahaneela, which is why I'm so excited to have you on Chican for you to tell your story. So tell us a bit
Thank
more
you.
about yourself and what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, it's very much an honor to be here and to be, just sharing some of my insights from along this journey. So a little bit about me. My name is Mahaneela. I am a multifaceted creative. That was an incredible introduction. So I think I'll just say that I'm a storyteller, and that takes form across many different mediums, from film to commercials. Even within film, there's commercials, there's music videos, there's narrative ideas, there's documentaries, photography, DJing. I have a radio show where I share my music and things that I listen to and inspired by. And really just finding any medium for me to share more about the countries, the cultures, and the communities that I'm from, bringing that to a wider audience, and also using my skill set to kind of shine a light on talent and stories that I feel are worth being told. So I see myself as a storyteller, and really I just see my role on this planet is to just, whatever skills I have, to use them to kind of amplify these stories. And so whether I am doing a commercial, consulting for somebody, DJ, managing, whatever it might be, I think all of those things still serve the same purpose, which is to uplift artists and to amplify stories.
Mahaneela, and tell us a bit more about your journey. When did you realize that this is your purpose? You want to tell stories. You want to shine the light on people that you think should be in at the forefront of role models
Mm-hmm.
and stories important to be told.
For me, I think I've always had, as a child, even my family would tell you, I was always had this sense of justice as a child. Like I was very righteous and really like believed in things, and if things were unfair, I wanted to stand up and speak out against them. Even as a kid, like I used to write for my school magazine, and I wrote articles about so many different things relating to, trying to create more understanding in the world, right? And like stop the biases and stop the judgments. And it's always been something I'm super passionate about. Even when I was in university, my goal was to do law and to become a criminal justice lawyer. I was super passionate about like being on the right side of history, being somebody who can like make a change. And I think because of my background, being that I'm from the UK, born and raised in London, by way of an Indian mother, born and raised in Uganda, by way of a Ghanaian father, a Jamaican stepfather. There's a lot of different elements to my identity. And I think because of that, and seeing how different demographics and different cultures would kind of play out in the city that I was from, I would always see the threads of connection rather than the things that divide us, because of just my my identity being who I am, there's parts of me that can relate to so many different types of experiences and different cultural practices and things, where I've always been fascinated with that, trying to find connection. And I think for many people who have like mixed backgrounds, that is sort of like your forever journey, is like trying to find connections and like have that kind of self-identifying moment where you feel like, you know, you belong. And so for me, I've always had an interest in that, in the kind of mixing of communities and cultures. I've always also had this interest in like shining a light on people who deserve it and telling stories who that deserve to be told, rather than, you know, the people that always have their stories told. So for me, those two things really combined with my love of creativity, something that has been with me ever since I was a child. I was very blessed to grow up with a grandfather who was a photographer, a wildlife photographer and an artist who spent 35 years in East Africa documenting the culture, the animals, the people. And so because of that, photography was in the backdrop of my life, you know, going to my grandma's house, seeing like cameras and equipment and all these different things. And so it felt like a natural medium to just take on when I wanted to start expressing myself creatively. So with that, you know, I'd get a camera and I'd start taking pictures, and I would obsess over like the details and editing. And I was very tech savvy and would like, you know, design different like templates, and it all just became this kind of like fun exercise and just like learning, you know, like learning how to use a new tool. And I think the turning point for me was when I was in university. I really started to, at the same time, expand my community. I started to meet people that were from like the African community specifically. And I think in my upbringing, I grew up in Southwest London, very predominantly white neighborhood. I was always like the outlier. There wasn't many people of color. And so I hadn't really had that many connections outside of my family. Two people from the Black community, two people even from the South Asian community, just outside of my immediate family. So for me, going to university, I started to meet new people. This was the beginning of the internet. You know, Instagram was starting, it was a brand new platform. Got on there, was on Twitter, and started to meet people online, and having this new freedom, being in uni, you know, I had a hall, so I would be able to like, you know, be more central to London, as opposed to before where I was very much in Southwest London and didn't really go outside of there. So I think for me, that was really the turning point, where I met a group of friends, a group of women, Black women, who really encouraged me to do photography and like continue down that path. We would meet up just to take pictures of each other, upload them to Tumblr, and like it became addictive, you know, the idea of like creating and making and like coming up with ideas and seeing them executed. So that was really where it began, and it led me to fall in love with this so much I ended up dropping out of university. I didn't want to pursue the law anymore, and I realized that there was a different way for me to tell that story, a different way for me to help people and to connect our cultures and find threads of connection between people, which was just through visual storytelling. So yeah, I think probably 2012, when I called my family and said, I'm going to drop out of university to be a creative. Everyone was like, what? And they were very actually supportive. My mum was always just like, as long as you have an idea of what else you're going to do, as long as you're not just dropping out because it's too hard, or you know, you don't want to do it, what do you want to do instead? And it was always like, as long as you know what's the focus instead, then go for it, kind of thing. And it was definitely the best decision I made. I mean, that group of friends became a collective, which then became a studio, my first studio that I worked with or created, called In Bloom. And that was just, you know, by accident. Group of girls became friends through the internet, started taking pictures, and then we would start to get brands saying, what are you guys? Are you a thing? Like, what is that? And we were like, we're just friends, but we can be a thing for sure. So we got our first ever branded project was with Nike, and it was a national campaign. And that was like insane, you know, to have such a huge brand, and a brand that, you know, since then, 20 2014 or whenever that was till now, 2024, a brand I've continued to work with in growing capacity, you know, as my career has grown. So it's just a really cool full circle moment. But I think that's definitely where it started. And I had like a lot of I don't know, I guess my experience was kind of the most varied. Like I worked in advertising, even whilst I was in university, I had 5 million different jobs. I worked in every single retail shop you could think of. I was a lifeguard. I worked in a rugby club. I did like everything, ice cream shop, every single store, fancy ones, Harrods, and then like, you know, less fancy ones, H&M. So all of the spectrum. And then when I dropped out of university, I was like, well, I'm not going to just try to be creative and do nothing else. I thought, let me be strategic. I'll get a job at an ad agency so that I'm in proximity to other people who are doing creative stuff. And so even with that, like in Bloom, the agency, it was really like, I mean, it was where we were learning everything, but it was where I was diverting everything I was learning from that commercial advertising space. And I was, you know, the girl getting coffees. I wasn't, you know, doing anything particular, but I was listening and I was learning, and then I was taking what I was learning and putting it into In Bloom and learning how to navigate and communicate with clients by overhearing what my bosses are talking about and then having those same conversations with people at Nike. And, you know, it helped. And so both myself and my friend Sade, she worked in music. That was her background. And she just started like internship type of role. And together, we kind of like grew a lot closer through doing In Bloom over our bonded love of music. And that was when I decided to create something called Cozy, which then became, you know, my production studio that I have now. So that was back in 2014 as well, all around the same era where I thought, well, I love music, I love art, I love fashion. I'm just going to make this blog and call it Cozy. And I'm just going to like write articles and make it look like an online magazine. And it was really all about the branding of it being an online magazine when it was really just me, especially at the beginning. But through that branding and like seeing, you know, I have the knack for branding and packaging this thing, I started to get other people reaching out. Hi, I'm a journalist. I'd love to write for Cozy. Or hi, I'm an artist. I'd love Cozy to interview me. And then before you knew it, we became a fully functioning, you know, editorial platform. I had multiple writers on staff. I was running it. You know, we had all these different things. And then me and Sade were like, okay, music, how can we kind of expand that? And so we started doing parties and events with Cozy, bringing that community online into a real life space. And I think that's like a really key moment where I realized that it's about connecting the dots and like bringing those people together. Oh, you're a musician and you have a music video and you need like a makeup artist. I know this makeup artist from this thing. And that was where I found so much value in being able to, you know, help these projects come to fruition through this network and community of people that we kind of like had built over time. So yeah, Cozy, that was the iteration of Cozy, how things really started for me and where they kind of like all stemmed from, you know?
Mahaneela, I love you're such a visionary and obviously a connector. And I'm wondering, how do you set the boundaries? You have your fingers in so many different pies. How do you
Mm-hmm.
set the boundaries and say, I've done this commercial work, but now I really want to get my personal creative pursuits and do this and that? How does it work
Yeah,
on a day-to-day basis?
yeah. So as of recent, I have just, like, after 10 years in doing this, have just enlisted the help of somebody else, an assistant. But prior to this, I have been navigating all of these different things from my commercial film work to my narrative, to my music videos, to my editorial photography, commercial photography, DJing, managing musicians, doing it all just by myself. And I think that the way that I've been able to manage it is just really largely going with the organic flow of like what my skill set is. So not trying to do all of these things at the same time, but actually like allowing whatever is like taking precedent at that time to take precedent, and then seeing how I can weave in other things. So say for example, it's like, okay, there's a lot of opportunities with film right now for me. maybe that's where I need to focus my energy. But within that, can I build in an idea where I do also a photography series on the same talent that I'm shooting the film? And so even within my commercial work too, I'm always trying to find ways to create a kind of cross between like the different disciplines that I have. Because for me, I think one thing that I would say is quite unique about my career is that I'm doing all of those different things, but also doing them all simultaneously at like a high level. I'm not just, and doing like passion photography here and there, and then doing like commercial stuff, or doing like passion filmmaking and then doing the real commercial photography stuff. It's like I'm doing commercial photography and filmmaking and trying to find jobs that I can flex both of those skills in one. The other thing I would say is just like in terms of creating the boundaries, like it's about listening to, yeah, what's going on in the market, like what type of skills people are asking me for, leaning into that. But also it's about like knowing when you need to set aside time for those personal projects, because ultimately, especially as a multifaceted artist, I know that a lot of the things that end up getting me the job are not the other jobs I've done. There'll be the little thing I did on that weekend with my friends, and then some brand sees it and it's like, we love the feeling of this. We want you to basically make this, you know? And I think just learning that those things have a value too, and that's very difficult, especially when you're a up and coming artist who needs money, right? And it's hard once you start getting a taste of those commercial projects. It's hard to find the time in your schedule to then just do stuff for no reason. And the thing is like, to get to where you are, that's what you did. I used to do stuff for no reason all the time. I mean, every weekend I'd be like, me and my friends, let's meet up, let's do a shoot, like coming up with concepts for no reason, just because we love to do it. And I think that has like really kept me, I guess, kept me within the conversation, is that I'm constantly, still doing like projects that are completely outside of like my commercial stuff. I'll do studio days where I just rent out a studio for a day. And I think like a lot of the time, especially young people, it's hard to wrap your head around it. And it took me a while too to understand that I'm an investment as well, and that like I need to actually spend, money, time, whatever it might be, to perfect my craft. Like I still do it to this day. And a lot of times people will say that it's not possible, that you can't do it. But I mean, I was able to do it with like very little, like I didn't need, okay, I didn't have money to hire a studio. I still had friends and I still had my camera. And that was like the main thing, and even before I had my camera, I had a disposable camera. I had my phone. I used to use my phone for a lot of my photography work when I first started coming up. And it was more about the intention of you actually investing the time to say, this weekend is blocked off because I want to make all this content or whatever it is that I want to do. And those are the things I've always found that caught the attention of people, was like the stuff that I'm busy doing on my off days. And I also think, yeah, just like practice too, like getting myself, booking a studio, maybe it's $150 or £150 for a day to just like practice, take pictures, get people to come in, meet people, because that's when, next week someone's asking me to cast for a Burna Boy music video. I know like 5 models that I've just met, and that I can like speak to, like I've worked with them, etc. So for me, I think it's always about like, I try to now, and this is a big like kind of focus for me this year, but new learning too, is like treating your work like it is a job, treating your work like it is really just as important as the other projects that are paying you. And that's something that I definitely feel like, especially in the height of starting to get all of this commercial projects and stuff, I lost sight of too. And I was like, I don't really feel like I have any time. The timing is such an illusion, and I think especially in this industry, you can always feel like there's not enough time, people are rushing you. When am I gonna, like, have a spare weekend just to do this? But the thing is like, if somebody called you up tomorrow, a brand, and said, we need you next weekend for this job, you'd find the time, right? Because there's a paycheck there, and it's like, well, actually I can cancel my plans and I can move things around. And I had to hold myself accountable to that, of like, why am I'm not making time for my own projects? And I think that is like a huge part of how you get new work. So for me, even this year, thinking of other areas that I can expand my skill set into, of like, okay, I'm a photographer, but predominantly my portfolio is people. Let's think about food photography. I'm super interested in food. There's opportunities where, someone has asked me, can you do a cookbook? And I'm like, yeah, of course, I'd love to. And then they look at my portfolio and they're like, I can't book you because there's nothing in here that has that. So this year, like, as an example, I'm like, right, I need to invest in like making food shoots happen, because I want to get more of that work. I also know that a big part of my storytelling is about gathering and community and all these different things, and food is a huge part of that. So it's like me reaching out to, or looking up, who's like a local chef in the area who might need photography. Like, can I go and like go to their restaurant, say, hey, like, I'd love to take pictures of your food. It's going to help both of us. And I think one thing that's super has been super useful is like keeping that line of communication open, and not just leaving it all up to like my agents and people to find me work and do all of that. Like, I'm an active like architect in my career every day, and like, I think the thing I've learned from working with all these different people that make up my teams now is that it's still all me. I have to lead everything. And if I'm not, like, you don't just get signed or whatever and then they just tell you what to do. Like, people are going to work as hard for it as they see you working hard for it. So for me, that's been like a really important thing for me, is like holding myself accountable to being like, this is my career. So how do I want to get better? How do I want to sharpen my tools? And how can I create scenarios where I'm doing that? I'm always trying to just learn, basically.
Mahaneela, I'm so impressed with all the different things that you do, these millions of balls that you keep in the air, and how unbelievably concentrated you are on your own craft, which essentially is what brought you all these jobs. So tell us a bit more about the top qualities that you think you have that serve you in doing
Yeah.
in your work in all these different media.
Yeah, I think first one is definitely just like my personality. I think like you have to be a people's person if you're going to be navigating the world of like client work and things like that. Ultimately, these brands are ran by people. So it's about humans and like finding connections with people. I have to meet different people every single day, people who are execs at agencies, people that work directly for the brands, and I don't know them. And it's the first time they see me is on a Zoom call, most likely, where I have to talk about this idea and why I'm interested in it. So I think for me, I always lead with like trying to show my true self, my authentic self. Like, this is who I am, this is my reaction to your brief, this is like why I'm interested in it. And I think like that's a really important quality of like not being afraid to show who you are, because I think especially in these corporate settings you kind of assume, and we have had to for a long time, women, people of color, anybody really who's marginalized has to kind of adopt a certain way of like being in these corporate spaces, right? A toned down version of yourself, a version of yourself that you think they're going to like or whatever. And I think for me, one thing that, especially just trying to operate at this level, I realized that like they're looking to me to lead. I'm a leader as a director, as a photographer, whoever, whichever talent I am on the shoot, like I'm leading, like it's my set. And so because of that, it's like not being afraid to step into that leadership. And actually, I do really look at my job, a lot of it, as leadership. Like, it's obviously I'm super creative and I'm doing that, but what am I doing? I'm leading creative teams. I'm leading groups of people to do this thing that I've come up with in my mind. And it's like, if I've got a team and I'm like the captain of the team, basically, I need my team to be hyped I need my team to believe that we're going to win, that we're going to do the thing that we came here to do. They all need to be signed on to that. So it's like, how do I, that's what I focus my energy on. It's like, how do I rally everybody to kind of like be on the same team with me? I need to build trust. They need to trust me and see I'm confident. I know what I'm doing. I know what I want to do. And I'm giving them also all the power to kind of like own their different pieces, like the set designer, make sure that they feel empowered, that I'm not just like, do this, do this, do this. I'm like, I'm so interested in you and what you're doing. Let's talk. How can we collaborate? You know, so one of the biggest qualities I would say is just personality, not feeling like corporate equals no personality and actually thinking corporate equals show who you are, and like that's what they want to see. Secondly, I would say just like as a part of the corporate like personality showing, I would say leadership is important, but also like having integrity is really important too. There's a lot of scenarios, and you know, it's definitely hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but there's a lot of scenarios where, you know, I have to course correct a client or put them on the right track because maybe they're going down a path that I already know is not going to be the best path for us to go down. We're still operating in a space where I am always the minority. And so the people I'm speaking to most of the time don't have my lived experience, although the things that I'm making most of the time are about people like me and our lived experience. And so because of that, I remember once someone said it to me and it just never left me, which was that I'm an expert. I am an expert in my lived experience. And nobody, doesn't matter if I don't speak the same lingo they speak, whatever, if they're making something that's for Black women and I am a Black woman and all these people are not, then I know I'm the expert. And so even just the power dynamic and the sort of shift in your mind of perception of like, I'm not here to just like do what you want me to do. You brought me here because of my expertise. And so it's up to me to guide you and work with you, you know, to achieve the goals you want while still being true to this thing that you brought me here for. And that might involve sometimes tough conversations, but it's about how they're communicated, you know, and about, again, going back to this idea of we're all a team. I'm the captain and I want to lead you to the best conclusion and seeing that as my role. I'm absolutely not the type of director that's gonna, or photographer that's gonna do something that I don't believe in. And I think that's also why people hire me, because they see that integrity where they respect that, where it's like, I'm not afraid to say, actually, I don't think it's a good idea that we use green screen on these Black women's faces because the way it's going to look in post, we should use blue screen because I think it will look better with the reflections in our skin tone. And these are things that people may just not be thinking about, because if that's something that they don't have to think about, I think about that when if I'm on screen and I think, oh, the green might reflect badly with my skin tone. So those are just like things that you have to remember, that whatever community it is that you come from or whatever it is you're trying to speak about, if you live that experience, you are an expert. So don't be afraid to speak with that gravitas as though you are an expert, because that's the reason that you've been hired. And then I say my third quality in it is really about just like making things feel fun, like not, I don't know, like I feel that a lot of the time there's people who do this a lot in the branded world and it can become like clockwork, you know, just like we're just doing it and going through the motions. Me personally, I'm not interested in making something that is like doesn't excite me, you know. And I think like that excitement and like people being able to tell that you are truly passionate and excited about this thing is like a game changer. And I think for me, one of the hardest things to do when you're coming up and you need money and all this stuff is to say no to stuff that you don't believe in, but there's a good check at the end of it, right? And like a lot of times I've had to say no to things that I really wanted to say yes to. But when I've, you know, given it time, now I look back and I realize all of those no's made so much sense. And like I definitely feel like they were the right decisions. But it is tricky, you know, it's not easy. I say all of this with the big caveat that it's not easy because I know that so many people are trying to, you know, make a living even. Which is why, you know, for me, I had a full-time job right up until 2020, you know, 10 years into doing this. So for me, I think I've always tried to be strategic with that and make sure that, you know, I'm able to support my creative endeavors by doing something else that gives me that stability. And I just try to find something that is, you know, close by to what I'm doing. I tell people that all the time. Like, you know, if you want to be a director, like, don't just like just try and direct and have no day job right now. Like, don't quit your day job. Like, you'd be surprised how many people still have, you know, regular income, or how many people just have family money and things that you just wouldn't even think about. And that a lot of people have safety nets that they're not disclosing. So for me, like, I've always tried to be really open in that, of like, don't be afraid to stay in like a regular job. Find time on the weekends after work. Like, that's what I've done my whole career. And it's only now 4 years I've only been like freelance for. And it's just been like crazy to think that like I'm only doing this now, over 10 years into my career. Have I actually been able to sustain a career without also having to have like a side job, you know? So I think that's a big illusion that I'm trying to break down as well, that a lot of people still have day jobs and have
Yes,
other
I love
things.
that you said that, Manila, because that's so true, and it's a brilliant way of being able to experiment. Manila, what
Yeah.
really comes across is that you have this innate confidence, and you really believe in yourself. You really know who you are. Where do you think that comes from?
Great question. I think that comes from my upbringing, definitely. I have a very unique upbringing in that I was basically born and raised in a old people's home, an old folks' home. My mum was the estate manager who worked there. So from the age of 6 till I was about 14, 15, I lived as the only child amongst like 30 old people. And so I think that now I'm older, I can really see that basically I was this little kid running around this old people's home, and everyone was just telling me how amazing I am, how great I'm going to be, how like I'm going to be the next prime minister, like every single day, right? And I just had a lot of positive affirmation around me that really boosted me and my self-confidence as a child, I think. And I never felt like there was a barrier to being able to do something. You know, my mum never ever was like, you can't do that, or you can't do this. Even that one moment of telling them, you know, I'm going to drop out of university, I did think, what they're going to say, because it's the first time I was sort of diverting from the traditional path. And they were just like, okay, well, what else do you want to do? You know, and it was always just like, whatever you want to do, we're going to support it. We just want to know that there's a thing that you want to
Yeah,
do, you know?
yeah.
And so I think it's definitely to do with that, of just like my mom always gave me so much confidence, told me, you know, I can do anything. When I would dream and, you know, daydream about ideas and stuff, even the way, you know, I'm very conscious of that now when I speak to people, especially children, like when they talk about, oh, it'd be cool if I could do this or if I could do that, I never, I'm like, well, you couldn't because of this or that. My mum was very like, yeah, and what else? And how else would you do it? And how else? And it kind of gave me that expansive type of mind in terms of how I come up with ideas, stories, everything. It was always like, and what's next? And then what else? You know? And so I think that that gave me a confidence in my own ideas. And just generally, you know, being a young child, having to communicate with adults all the time, I think that also gave me a confidence in how I speak and how I present and everything, where, you know, I felt like I was like a little kid, but I also probably, if you met me then at 10, you think I was like a mini old person. Like, I'd be talking about like the war and like all these things. Like, I was like a mini old lady as
I
a
love
kid,
it. It
pretty
sounds
much.
like an incredible village that you grew up in.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
what top tips would you have for younger girls working with clients in the creative industry? What does it take?
Okay. I would say, I mean, it takes, first of all, it takes a lot of mental fortitude, I would say. Especially being, yeah, a young woman, it can be very challenging. I mean, you've got a lot of different things up against you, right? Obviously, one being that you're a woman. Two, being whatever demographic you come from, that could also be a barrier. And three, that you're young. And like that, being a woman and being perceived as young is like double combination of like nobody trusts you, nobody basically like thinks you have any authority. It's very difficult to navigate. So I would say that some of my top tips would be, the first one is like, just first of all, we go off of the facts, which is that you're going to be fighting a battle, right? To be respected, like, period, right? Like, you're not going to just immediately have respect, which is what a lot of men, instant respect in the industry. But you are going to be seen as that girl who probably makes the coffees, and why did they let her in this room? And, and there's a whole lot of stigma that you have to kind of like go up against. So for me personally, like the way that I've always tried to navigate is like, one, always keeping it so professional. Two, always like having receipts, having everything in my favor, like that I want to talk about, backed up, like receipts, email chain, over communicating all the time. I think like one thing that we don't talk about enough is just like how important it is to protect yourself, especially as a young woman in this industry. There are so many horror stories. It's like it doesn't need, we've had enough horror stories now that I think that young women can just learn from the lessons that we have learned, like in order to just navigate this industry in a more safe way. So I think keeping records of everything is so important. Like, and especially because people will professionally try to gaslight you and tell you, no, you didn't say that to me, or no, I don't remember that, especially people that are like senior, who maybe are not as turned on in doing their job anymore. They don't really care as much. There's such a difference in somebody who's young and hungry and joining a company to somebody who's probably your boss, who treats it like a 9 to 5. They go home, they've got kids. This is a completely different thing. I remember working in music. I was first in, last out. I'd be there at the label like until midnight, staying up, because I don't have kids. I don't have any other responsibilities. This was like the most important thing to me. And I think that is a great quality, but it's also something that people can really take advantage of. And so I think it's like trying to strike the balance of knowing that, yes, this is an incredible opportunity and like you can use it to leverage, and you've got to show how much you care, but also remembering that this is just a job, and that these people are not your friends. These people don't care about you, like outside of the context of what you can do in this job. And so don't sacrifice your own life for this thing or this entity that is not pushing you forward in some way. I remember vividly, and I always tell the story of how I missed my mum's 50th birthday because I was like, I have to do this thing. Like, I felt so much perceived pressure, of like, well, you've got to get this stuff done and you've got to get this stuff out on social media. It was like all for a social media post, which blows my mind. Like, I actually felt it was that important that I couldn't go to my mum's party. Was happening, and I was like, Mum, I'm sorry, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. In the end, I missed it. And it was like, because they needed me, right? But then when you step out and you realize that these people, like, literally, they could be halfway through an email and it gets to 5 o'clock, they're going to close the laptop and send it tomorrow because this is just a job. And I think that was like a really big wake up call. And it happens to so many women where we see that we have like gone way too far and gone way too deep in terms of giving our passion, energy, everything. And that's why, for me, having Cozy, I was putting my passion into something else. So I think another tip would be, go at your job with everything you have, but also hold some of that back for yourself and make sure you're putting it into something that is going to benefit you, because ultimately everything, like as far as an institution, you're just part of like the bigger machine. And so ultimately, like, you have to be, it feels almost counterintuitive, like, to be, because you want to join a team and you want to help the team, and it feels almost like that's such a, honestly, quite a masculine perspective, to be like, think about yourself and make sure that you take care of yourself. But that's honestly why so many men are succeeding in these type of roles, and so many women are in a situation where they are doing all that work and not getting the accolades or not advancing to the next stage of their career. You have to, I say it all the time, like, think like a white man, like act like a white man, like navigate like like a man, you know, make sure that if you did something, don't be humble and let somebody else take credit for it, you know, keep a record of all of these things, show what your work is doing, and like make sure that everybody else is understanding what work you're putting into this team. I couldn't be mad that I missed my mum's 50th. Nobody made me do that except for me. I was in an illusion of like how important all this stuff was, and I wasn't even just looking up to look around to see, well, nobody else is here. So why is it so important for me? It's almost like how you see yourself. Like I think I had seen myself as, I need to prove myself. These other people didn't feel like they needed to prove themselves. You've already got the job, you're already in the door. So pushing myself to that level is a tip I would always say to other young women. Like you don't need to prove yourself. You're already in the door. Like once you're in, like you can treat this as a job. You can divert your interest into other aspects. Like it's a false sense of like urgency and importance that the industry literally thrives on the work of all these like young people who are so passionate and feel like it's make or break. That's how these people manage to just do nothing and like chill all day and have a multi-million-pound house, you know? So just taking a step back is important and realizing like it's not that deep, guys. It's just not that deep.
Don't
Um,
sacrifice
yeah,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, don't.
Get a side
Because
hustle.
exactly.
Mahaneela, so what are your plans and goals for the next year? Where are you heading?
My plans and goals for the next year is very much focused on the narrative space. So I just released my first short film called Bumped, which is currently doing a festival rounds right now. And we've won a couple of awards, which is really exciting. So the next thing, yeah, the next thing is basically to just keep going down that path. I really want to do more bigger commercial spots. Like I would love to have like a Super Bowl spot or something like that in the future. Um, but also looking at like on my non-commercial work, just what types of stories do I want to tell. I think a big part of that is like telling my own story as well and finding a way to do that. So that's kind of the things I'm focused on right now. And yeah, just like I guess sharpening my tool, getting better and better. Like I'm doing a lot of courses, like writing course here, this course there. I didn't go to film school or dropped out of university. So for me, I take a lot of responsibility for, improving myself and my skills. And I think that's something that also keeps me in the conversation is like, I'm always trying to like learn the next thing or whatever it is.
Yeah, and you're so unbelievably good with that, Mahaneela. So I'm so grateful that you told your story today to such great
Thank
detail
you.
because you really are acing it. And it's so inspiring to hear you speak.
Thank you so, so much. Thank you for having me.